A week from this Wednesday, the Wednesday after the business meeting, we'll do part 4 of the providence of God. Remember, we're saying that things like luck should not be part of the Christian's vocabulary because there is no such thing. Everything is brought to us, even by unbelievers, within the providence of God. And if an unbeliever gets something good, it's not necessarily a blessing. We think that it is. Think they've got $1 million, or they won the lottery, 50 million, and that would be so great. Well, the fact is, if they're an unbeliever, it can be a source of cursing. Number one, they don't use it for the Lord and for His glory. They tend to focus upon it and reject Christ as Savior, and die and go to hell and have to leave it all behind anyway. So riches are only good if those who have them have the capacity to utilize them for Christ and get rewards in eternity future. So there is no such thing as luck. We need to erase it from our vocabulary and focus on the providence of God. What is really the source of your blessing? God Himself. But now, I'll bet, figuratively speaking, if I were a betting man, that I have had in the past year and a half, over 100 discussions, and not evangelistically speaking either, on the way management and labor are today. There are changing forces in the marketplace today, and they seem to be focusing on management and labor. Now, there are always stresses in the job market, in industry, in business. For example, you get more people, you get increased competition, you get people who undermine and undercut your particular business, and then you have to make adjustments yourself. And so it is difficult. And it's going to get even more difficult as we make the transition from a semi-capitalist state going to a semi-communist state, and we'll explain that in just a bit. But Antichrist government is a social democracy, and it's just 1 degree to the left, as it were, of communism. Perhaps I should say to the right of pure communism. But that's what his particular government will be. And we're moving that way. And the reason that I say that from the start is because many of you are wondering whether you are in management or in labor. Actually, there really is no distinction. Assigning labor only to a certain group of people, in actuality, makes it seem like those in management never work. The fact of the matter is, those in management produce a product, a team of people working together for one goal. Those in labor produce a product, and they work hard as well. But they produce a product that does not have a volition. And I ask you, as you're considering both are important. Of course, we would never slight either one. But if you had your druthers of working with something that couldn't talk back to you, couldn't have a bad attitude, wouldn't disobey, wouldn't swear at you if you told them, or somebody who could do all those things, which would you rather work with? Which is easier? Somebody that over here might be hard-headed, stubborn, bent on rebelling and revolting against your authority, or something here, putting a screw in a hole all the time. Well, obviously, when it comes to difficulty of management in the workplace, trying to manage someone else with a volition that might be contrary to yours is more difficult. But that, again, is not slighting either group because both work hard. I was merely pointing out that it seems to be a misnomer when we say management and labor because it implies that only labor works. And I think that is the mentality today. And that, of course, is nonsense. Both groups work. But the point that we are trying to make is that we're coming toward the end of the age. And at the end of the age, there is going to be a certain type of government that is going to prevail. And that government is a social democracy wherein you have a friction created between management and labor. Now, I'll give you the Bible picture of it from the book of Daniel. We'll not turn there. We've done it many times. By the time you get to the end of Nebuchadnezzar's vision of the Colossus image, what two things are in place that are characteristic of Antichrist's kingdom? Feet of iron that try to, doesn't quite do it, mix with miry clay. The feet of iron is indicative of management trying to control and get things done. The feet of clay, labor, trying to do their own thing all the time in revolting. And it says, the kingdom is weak because there is no mixture of these two things, iron and clay. And there is that friction between the two. The one in the iron trying to make things adhere together, keep things together, make it work and the like. And the clay always wanting to dry out and crumble. So, that's where we are today. We're heading toward that particular form of government, which has its strengths and has its weaknesses. But I'm telling you that because it's not going to get any better. Oh, as we're looking toward the end of the age and you're in one of these positions, perhaps I'm not giving you any comfort to have you to understand it's not going to get better. It doesn't matter where you're going to work. It doesn't matter where you're going to be. These tensions are going to surface. They surface in a local church all the time, where a pastor harps on rules and regulations, or a congregation, many of which could care less about rules and regulations. He's not going to tell me what to do. And there is the friction. And then the pastor doesn't get things done because the clay doesn't adhere to the iron, and the clay goes its own way. But then when the clay wants to have the comfort of the iron can only do so much. And so what do you have? The clay criticizing the iron. Oh, it's your fault that this isn't done. It's your fault that that isn't done. And there is the harping, the griping, and the complaining between both. The clay always griping at the iron for not having done this and that, and the iron doesn't have the wherewithal because the clay does not provide it. So there are definite frictions here. But not only that, we think of the atmosphere in which we now live. Exploding populations, increased competition, limited space and resources, increasing governmental regulations, controls, and interferences with business. You can all relate to that wherever you are. Did you ever hear of OSHA? The government has its big nose right in our business. Also, globalization of communications, money, markets, pressures over workers' rights versus corporate bottom line. Now, we are going to include that in our study here. Because in actuality, there is where it all touches. There are those that are corporate all the way. After all, if you do not make a profit, you cannot stay in business. So the bottom line becomes very, very important to somebody in the management. Sometimes, though, and that's what we're going to talk about, there is the flaw in capitalism. They do so to the neglect of their workers. The bottom line is important only if your workers can share together in some of the things that you expect as management. Now, then on the other end, you have the workers, and it is their rights. If they don't get their particular rights, they seem to think that when they showed up on the job, that anybody in management is their enemy. And we're going to discuss exactly where they got that idea. The one is the bottom line mentality. The other is the labor union mentality. Both are wrong. Both are absolutely wrong. The one that we've got to make a profit, and I don't care if the workers get paid. The others, I'm going to have my way, or I'm going to threaten you. I'm going to damage your property. You ever hear of sabotage? You know where that came from? Group of shoe manufacturers decided that they were going to revolt against the company, and so they were going to damage their machines. So they would throw their wooden shoes into the machinery and sabotage it to hurt the company, because the company wasn't giving in to their demands. Now, all of these things are very serious because they are surfacing in the business place today. Now, as history progresses, you always have had these things. But as it's coming to a head, as this dispensation ends, with the formation of Antichrist's kingdom, and by the way, his kingdom is already foundationally formed. Did you ever hear of the European Union? That's his kingdom. Do you ever hear of the European banks? That's his means of controlling people. You ever hear of the euro dollar? That's it's already here, but it's going to be floated in 2002. It's already here. You've got 15 nations that are associated with this. It will come down to 10 core nations and then satellites. But it's already here. We are getting the overflow of this here in the United States of America, surfacing in tensions between management and labor. Now, I want you to understand that in actuality, some of the frictions that have been created today have been created by two men. One is named Adam Smith, and the other is named Karl Marx. The difficulties that are being seen in the Western world today come from the concepts, the ideas, the business philosophies of these two men. Some of the things that each of them contends is important and right. It's not necessarily bad. We have benefited from both of these men. However, they didn't carry it to the middle of the road where the Bible position is. And that's what we're going to see. Now, what about Adam Smith? He was born in 1723. He died in 1790. And he wrote a book, The Wealth of Nations. Now, for those of you that know your history, you would know that this is about the time that what was happening in Western Europe and Britain. It's called the Industrial Revolution. And so the making of heavy industry was being brought in at that time. Much of the philosophy of the business of that day was given to us by Adam Smith, where he said in this book, The Wealth of Nations, that the foundational prosperity of any nation is dependent on lack of government interference. He said little to none. None's preferable. But you have to have some, but that's fine. But keep your nose out of private industry. Laissez-faire means allowed to do. You're free to do with your business as you see fit, and you act in accordance with self-interest. Now, mind you, that is a Bible principle. We've taught it here. When you have a crowd of people around you, and there are 100 people, and 99 are saying, don't trust Christ as your personal Savior, what should you do? Act in your own best spiritual interest and believe in Christ. Excuse the phrase, to hell with the 99. You wish they'd trust him too, but if they're not gonna, to hell with them. I'm sure gonna, because I'm not gonna go to hell and I'm gonna have a relationship with God. That's acting in your own best self-interest. However, Smith would say, you know the gospel, but don't pass it along to others. You say, be selfish with your self-interest. Whoa, that's not a Bible concept either. But using that analogy, going back to him with regard to wealth. Get wealth any way you can. Ever hear a pastor teacher rant and rave on that business of why you need to be very cautious with this matter of of sales and with this matter of discounts and all of it. Why? Simply because when you are in the business of being a laborer, you want management to pay you. When you become a person that's going to purchase something, you become management. Do you know how you dislike management for being El Cheapo? I'm worth more, and get on the other end. Now you become management and you don't want to pay your workers. Well, that's hypocrisy. If you want to get paid what you're worth, why do you want to discount and look for sales for somebody else who is working? That's hypocrisy. And if there's something that we do not like here, it is hypocrisy. Now, that doesn't mean that that we're going to be cured of our ills, all of us, of this matter of being two-faced. We'll talk about that. But nowhere is it more prevalent than when we are on the job. We expect management to respect us, pay us, treat us like we want to be treated. Then we become management, and guess what we do? That's just a little peon down there. Hey, let's Jew him down to 20 and 40% off so he doesn't get his due. And I can build my wealth, I can build my happiness on the back of this guy. I'm not going to work in a sweatshop, but I don't care if this guy works in a sweatshop because I'm not going to pay him. And I'm telling you that is the wrong philosophy, but it comes from this fellow here, Adam Smith, a capitalist who did not believe the Bible, and we will see some of the errors, but what is called a compensation ethic, the biblical compensation ethic. You can quote it as well as I can. The laborer is what? Worthy of his hire, which simply means that unless all the profit Adam Smith gets, if he doesn't take care of his workers, he is not right with God. He can be a billionaire, whoopee-ding. He is going to die and be held accountable to God for the fact that he stole from his workers. Now, I know that perhaps you don't like me saying some of these things about what I'm saying, but do you know I am standing for your rights better than a capitalist and better than a communist. I stand for the workers more than any labor union here because I think you ought to get paid what you're worth. I think you ought to get your just due. I think there ought to be equality. But that means that when you become management, I think you ought to have the same attitude that, well, I need to compensate my laborers. And with all of those materials that you go and buy, though you don't see a face behind it, though you don't hear their name, there is somebody who produced that. There is somebody working somewhere, probably in Korea or Taiwan or Bora Bora, who's working for 50 cents and a chicken bone every day in some sweatshop for 14 or 16 hours to produce this for you, and then you want to get something make it even less in price because you don't care. Oh, when it's you care. But when it's them, the us-them type deal, you don't care because you're like Smith. You think that it's more important to amass your own wealth. You get the wealth and don't share it. You get the gospel, keep it to yourself. And that, of course, is the flaw in capitalism. Now, mind you, I lean toward capitalism myself simply because of the biblical principle of acting in your own best interest. However, I lean the other direction when it comes to sharing the blessing, sharing it. If I've got the gospel and I keep it to myself, well, that's selfish. That shows lack of concern for other people who could be blessed with the riches of Christ that I want to hoard for myself. Well, that's nonsense. Hoarding wealth on the backs of those who actually earn it and deserve it is wrong. It's stealing. It's just stealing in a different way. It's legal stealing, as it were. And I think it is wrong. Now, by the way, Smith was one who probably was very, very wealthy, and he probably hired somebody else to do his, and I say this, his dirty work with regard to the workers, and got all of the proceeds going right to his coffers. By the way, we just came out of Christmas. Do you know what Scrooge was? Scrooge was a capitalist. That story was written right at the heart of the Industrial Revolution, where his workers were working in the cold, and he would only give them one lump of coal for the day to keep them warm. He wasn't going to give them the Thanksgiving or Christmas bonus that they deserved. He expected them to be poverty-stricken, but work hard and give him all the money, and he wasn't about to yield and budge. Capitalism, in that sense, is wrong. We need to think of our workers, their families, their well-beings. And God bless you, Tiny Tim, for the illustration. Anyway, that's pretty neat. Okay. But now there's another guy over here, and his name is Karl Marx. He was born in 1816, died in 1883. He came at the other end of the Industrial Revolution. Now, by the way, as I said, Smith here probably didn't hold excuse the phrase, real job. Karl Marx never held a real job either. Karl Marx was a healthy man, strong back and mind. But because he was a dedicated revolutionary, he never took a job. He was funded, as it were, by Frederick Engels, another socialist friend of his. And Marx was married, had 6 children, but he never worked a lick in his life aside from writing the book, The Communist Manifesto, which was a reaction to The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. Now, why didn't Marx work? I'll tell you why. He couldn't hack it. Smith didn't want to. He thought he'd just make money off the backs of others. Marx was different. He couldn't hack it because he was the one who believed that there was going to be a transition from capitalism to communism from the hands of the owners or rulers or management into the hands totally of the laborers or workers, and we have named it a labor. But if he took a job, notice his dilemma. Smith had his own dilemma and hypocrisy. If he took a job, he would have what? A boss over him. Marx. Nobody's going to tell me what to do because I'm going to overthrow. You know all the hippies riots and all the things that happened in the 60s and through the 70s there. Do you know what they're based on? The writings of Karl Marx. China, Russia in their communism, where everybody looks the same. You talk about everybody looking the same in one whole society. They all have pretty much the same drab, gray clothes on, the same sad look on their face. It's no wonder the Russians have to drown their tears in their vodka every night because things aren't going to get any better under communism. You can't act in your own best self-interest, and you know that most of your neighbors are lazy bums not doing the job anyway, and there's no way to rise above your circumstances. There's the flaw in communism, unless you do what? Unless you attack your employers. But the problem was with both the Chinese and the Bolshevik, Menshevik revolutions in Russia was once you revolt, who do you have to revolt against after communism is in place? So Marx said, if I take a job, somebody's going to be over me, and I'm going to have to tell him, get off my back. They even had a song, tell all the bosses, get off your back. Tell all the bosses, get off your back. But then if I take a job and I get promoted, guess what? I'm management. Now I've got to tell people what to do, where to go, what you expect of them. And they're going to revolt against me. They're not going to like me very much if I'm management. And so he was always conveniently sick, healthy as a horse, couldn't find anything wrong, but he never took a job simply because he had this dilemma. He couldn't hack it in the real world. He would only tell others what he thought should be done. So, here are the two groups. Now, right now, at this point, we are operating under a system that is heading toward the left. I guess I should have drawn these different because I'm going to the right here, but you understand. It's heading toward communism. Just like the New Age movement went underground and surfaced in repackaging, the labor movement has gone underground and surfaced in repackaging. And we are moving there. We're not going to get to a communist state, but we will stop globally at a social democracy headed by Antichrist. Right now, we are influenced by a man by the name of Keynes. Keynesian doctrine with regard to management and labor. And it incorporates most of the factors in the job place. But Marx, as we are on him, believed that it was going to end up as a total communistic government around the world. That it would be taken, the wealth that is, from the hands of a few and placed in the hands of the many. It would be taken with minimal governmental interference to maximal governmental interference, and it's controlled by government or the people. Now, he called this several things that you're probably very familiar with. Class warfare, class struggles. Where did that come from? Where is it written in stone, as it were? It's actually paper. Where is it written that a worker has a right to do whatever is necessary to tell his bosses off and to undermine or overthrow their authority? Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx, Justification. Where is it written that you can get all the wealth you can and just disregard the care of your workers and just compensation for them? Right here, The Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith. Now, Keynes saw it, and that's where we are now, but let me tell you, because of the rise of Western Europe, we're going to end up in a social democracy. And by the way, here's a little bit with regard to our own type of problems here, or the backlash that we receive due to this fact. President Clinton is a social democrat. He's not totally red, but he certainly is pink. And over here, where did he go when he was revolting against the government of the United States of America? Moscow. Where did he go when he was a Rhodes Scholar? Oxford University in England. You know what that is? That is a hotbed. It's a place where liberal social democrats leading to a socialistic, communistic state are bred. Do you know why the Democrats, including President Clinton, always says, well, what do the polls say? Why? The polls reflect the, quote, will of the people. If he committed a crime, I don't care what the will of the people is. It is right to judge him if he did the crime. I'm not saying one way or the other. I've got my ideas. But if he did it, does that mean that we're going to take a national vote every time somebody gets in trouble to see whether the people like this guy or not, as to whether we're going to prosecute? That is sheer idiocy. And when that happens, and by the way, it's happening, the rule of law goes down the drain, the head of gold in Nebuchadnezzar's image, and the rule of emotion, feeling, what the majority thinks. And there are times, look at the cross. Jesus Christ was hanging there, perfect man. And who was it that turned against him? The whole world. Even his followers abandoned him. He stuck with the will of God and completed it in his life, despite what the rest of the world thought. Now, there are times when majority can rule and it's justified, it has its place. But when it violates the rule of law, then it's wrong. Anyway, Marx called this the class struggle, class warfare. So that, now here's where we get the real conflict. When you step on the grounds of your factory, of your office building, of your place of business, and you are a laborer, you have to think of management as the what? Enemy. That's what he had. Because this is a class warfare. The haves and the have-nots. He's got this kind of house and this kind of car, and I don't have that. And so therefore, that's what I want. And we believe in the redistribution of wealth. And any means is justified to get it. Now, to begin with, if he had been known his Bible, the capitalists over here, his workers would have been justly compensated. So they wouldn't have to be envious all the time of not having exactly what management has. They would give what is right and due to their workers. But anyway, this is where the tension comes in. Mark says, you're at war. So those of you that are in management, those of you that have your own businesses, and wonder what in the world is going on as to why I can't get these work, because they're buying into the package deal. You, boss, are the enemy. And then you, laborer, on this side, you're a peon. You're a peasant. You don't deserve to be compensated. You're just here in this life to cater to my needs. And that, of course, is the capitalist idea. Both are wrong. But I just wanted to point out the struggle with it. Now, Marx actually gave this a name. That it would take an evolution for the revolution. That it wouldn't come overnight, that it would come in successive stages. What is that? The transfer of wealth from those who had wealth to those who didn't have it, so that it would be from the hands of the few to the hands of the many. And we're in that state right now. Antichrist, the mark of the beast, is a social democratic concept so that everybody will have the government to what you ladies, you can't run up the credit card, because the mark of the beast, you only have so much a limit. Everybody has so much, maybe you're probably good. It's a good thing that you're saved on this side of the rapture, so you don't have to take the mark of the beast, because that'd probably kill some of you anyway, not to be able to run it up to the max. Anyway, where am I? Going from capitalism to Marxism is a transition of evolution, where certain things are going to be said, certain things are going to be done, certain struggles are going to be won over and over and over and so forth, until finally the workers get their due. Now, the name of that transition is called dialectical or dialectic materialism, where dialectic, there would be a transfer over time of material. Now, with both Smith and Marx, they weren't very godly. Smith was selfish to the maximum, but Marx was an avowed atheist. That's why China and Russia, officially in their governments, are atheistic. We believe that material and the individual, not God and the spiritual, are the driving forces of history, and that history can be interpreted in light of dialectic materialism. The workers going after wealth. But then again, once the workers get wealth, what do you have? An unfair situation. And then you have people who get wealth who spend it without wisely understanding Bible principles, and so they spend it, and so they don't have wealth anymore. And it is this constant struggle for wealth. And so Marx says, this is how you interpret history. And that it will eventually come to the hands of the many. The greatest good for the greatest number. Have you ever heard that? That's Marxist phrase. And it's going to transfer. But we're saying that there is an in-between state where workers should be justly compensated and bosses should be respected. Now, mind you, there are an infinite number of factors involved in any one given instance. So what we're going to do is attempt to give you some Bible principles on how you should act when you're in management and when you're in labor. I didn't mean in labor like giving birth, when you're in labor as a class or a group of people. Now, the reason that I say that is that during the course of our lives, we switch back and forth. We go on the job, and we're a laborer under management. We walk in a store, in a mall, in a place of business, and we become management, paying laborers. What is your attitude when you're a laborer with regard to management and what you expect of them? What is your attitude when you are now management and you want laborers? So that places it in a different light. Now it's no longer class warfare. It is, what Bible principle do I apply when I'm what, where? That's not double talk. Figure it out and you'll understand. When I am a laborer, what do I do? What do I expect of management? And when I'm management, what do I expect of labor? Now, it's an important point because, like with Smith, he didn't want to follow the Bible principle of the laborers worthy of his hire. Marx didn't want to follow the Bible principle of obey them which are in authority over you, showing respect to bosses. Both have their good points. We're glad for self-interest and acting this way, but we don't want selfish interest. And we're glad for Marx's concern about the workers, but it's been hell to pay with regard to bosses with his philosophy. So keep this in mind. We are done with this hour. More to come. And when you come in next time, turn to Luke 10 because that's where we'll be.